What if I told you that on average, I save 100 hours a week using AI tools? In this video, I'll be showing you a glimpse of my A to Z process for supercharging business productivity. You'll see how I've helped industry leaders like Chris Do change their game for how they show up in real-time events and synthesize past calls and meetings. It's this instant insight and reflective refinement that helps us grow forward. Now I'm sharing that with you. And be sure to stick around until the end because I'll be deep diving on each of the tools I cover today in future videos to come. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Let's get started. To do this, I use a variety of different tools. One of the ones I use the most right now is called Otter AI. This goes to all of my calls, even the ones in real time right now, while I'm busy in something else. And I can't be two places at once, and this is where Otter closes that gap. So after each call and even during the actual meeting, I get a real-time transcript that I'm able to look at and understand at a granular level. This call, for example, is an introductions call where Margot wanted to get to know me, and you'll notice that for the speakers, I did 72% of the talking. So for our next call, I want that to be the other way around. What I'll do is I'll use this data and I'll do things like craft positioning statements and talk about how I'm driving change through the models that we discussed and who I'm serving and how I'm going to serve them. So this is Otter AI's built-in chat, but I prefer going up to the triple dots, more options, and export and as a PDF, and then I take this PDF and I go into my specific tools that I know do the job how I'm hoping it will. And one of my favorite tools to do this is called Apari. So I will log into Apari, and once we're inside, I'll go to my folder where my library is. These are all my documents and trained data, and these are some different calls I've had over the past couple months. Not an extensive collection, but I'll click upload file. I'll drag in my discovery call with Margot today, and I'll click upload. And if you had a handful of files, you see it's already most of the way done, and now it gets indexed. And indexing means that you can go through this file in chunks, and that's how it's going to do that when you ask questions. It's going to chunk out that file, and it's going to parse the most important pieces. So, under the chat area of Apari, the research assistant, I'm going to go to a fresh thread here, and if you go to the mode, you can set it to Semantic Scholar and look at science and research papers. You can set it to Google and crawl real-time data. You can use their built-in tool as it is, and you can train it on custom document retrieval, which is the most common mode that I use this tool in. So if we select the gear next to document retrieval, that's going to pull up the options menu, and you can see my library here, all the folders I've separated it into, and from here I can simply click meetings and have all of my meetings selected from that folder, or I can click the library itself and I can come down to a specific thing like the discovery call. With this one file selected, I'll close this dialog box, and now you'll notice that little yellow caution triangle is gone. I'll then select my model. I like using Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and I prefer that because it gives a better outcome for reason and logic based answers, which are why I'm using these tools in the first place. So all I did was click the X to close that upload dialog box, and this is a draggable chat. Here's what we'll do. So once you've got your files loaded down and you have your fresh chat thread set up to the document retrieval mode and your model selected, then we're going to go into prompts, and I'm going to choose this white paper prompt that I came up with that I like using on all of my call data. So I'm going to change the word thread to document because documents are what they call attachments, and sometimes I use this for thread data, but I start by using it for document data. Close my download area there so we get a better view, and I'll close this right side dialog box and make it just a little bigger. So now if we hit send, we're going to see that it's going to process this query. It's going to take about 30 seconds or so, maybe less, but it's going to start reading and rereading and looking for patterns in the document. It's already read that 3 times at this point, and it's looking for my query of this white paper, what I'm hoping to achieve to extract out of it, and now it's reading it a 4th time before it begins the process of writing out that answer. And here we go. We start with an executive summary, an introduction to the topic, and then sections by topic, with key quotes pulled out from that precise call. What this allows us to do is start to understand the patterns behind the conversations we have, whether those are peer-to-peer conversations, sales conversations, or important leadership decision-making conversations, ones that we have with ourselves or with a team. Now we end up on the other side of this custom prompt that I've designed with a white paper that's Socratic and strategic, and presents you with some follow-up questions, some quotable quotes, as well as a glossary of terms, because in an age where everybody's using different terms, things like the word machine learning could mean a million different things depending on who you talk to. From here we have this basic white paper with these analyses and these patterns extracted that it thought were the most important. The question becomes, where do we go from there? And that's where my second prompt comes in. This is where we dig up deeper details, and we do this specifically on me, since that's who the call was about this time. And if it were serving the other party, all I'd do is switch out that name. So these prompts, look at it reading it 8 to 12 times, and now we have an even deeper version of my pain points, my strategies, my challenges, and maybe the best approaches for me to take next. And it's even making color matrix dot tables that I've taught it. So past attempts, what worked and didn't, how I think, learn, communicate, create, and all of these integration strategies come together to bring these future considerations and next steps into clear focus. So what we end up with is this action guideline that is strategic, tailored, and is aligned with who we are, how we think, and what we do best. So now that I have a deeper dive white paper specifically on my challenges, results, past attempts, future frameworks, I'm going to now click the third prompt, which will be to kind of expand those tables and give us a deeper dive on other patterns that we may not be considering that are found in these details. So again, it'll read over this however many times it needs to, and now we'll start getting up to 10 tables, and this will make 10 tables that are highly varying. They talk about different considerations, and this is all from this one phone call. So this video chat over the course of an hour and a half has now turned into a strategic action plan and refined iterations of improvement, not just thinking about it and maybe not acting or taking action. What we do next is consider, how do we go into things like the charts and diagrams? What should we consider beyond what we can look at in these tables? And in that 2-layer white paper, the shallow surface level call recap report and the deeper Matthew specific pain point report. Now it will make the top 10 charts, graphs, diagrams, heat maps, you name it, and it will code them in Python, and then in one extra step, we'll convert this Python code into usable images. These charts and graphs show the details, they show the tipping points, and they talk about things that we feel but might not always see. So I'm gonna copy this in one click without citations. I'll come over to ChatGPT, which I don't really use except for certain things like coding, and once I'm in GPT, this is some other data I was working with, and I'm just gonna say now process this. And then it's going to proceed to make the code block for each. It'll put them all together in a list like this. And then when it's done, it's going to spit them all out back to back. And it's incredibly fast. Look at it updating some of the code because it noticed it needed to improve something. This is part of why I do love ChatGPT. For things like code, it's incredible. Here we are at the end. It's going to start showing these now. And as long as it doesn't get hung up, there it goes. It's going to make the remaining ones, those last 4. Wonderful, and then it's going to make a few more. So the beauty of this is I don't know how to code Python. I can somewhat read what's going on up here on the screen, but the fact is we can see trends over time, and we can start to understand these trends, and it even asks follow-up questions like comparing revenue projections and optimizing these strategies. So what happens when we click things like that? And it continues to give rooted guidance that may or may not be directly aligned with each of these charts. So now we have have guidance on how to think of each of these, and then we can take these charts and graphs and diagrams, and we can think through them as individuals, we can share them with our teams, our mentors, our communities, and we can get a better, well-rounded approach to what is this situation and what does it call for next. So if we look at some of these, let me crack one open. This says time saved per week using AI tools. Look over there at strategic planning. I save over 25 hours a week right now using strategic planning AI tools. When combined with data analysis, content creation, customer service, I'm clocking well over 100 hours a week I'm saving, and this is before I even start to automate. So the question becomes, when we really start to dig deep on how to connect these dots, what does that look and feel like for being able to chart things like what does fractional advising versus the YouTube channel versus corporate training look like? How do these challenges stack up and what are their severity? Financial stability is more of a challenge than personal branding. And what does my profile look like for how I think, learn, communicate, create? This is almost like a compass. I've always wanted to make this diagram, never have, but now thanks to these programs, I'm able to start visualizing things that have been stuck up in my head for the longest time, and I'm able to start helping myself and others best. Let's look at a few more of these diagrams it created, like time allocation before and after AI integration, strategic planning on the far left if I'm covering it up, client interaction, content creation, and administrative tasks. You'll notice that almost all of those are improved. It should be less of a time percent after you implement those systems. It's just a matter of building them up strategically. So it may be a time allocation after implementation, but this will go down over time because we will improve the system, we'll make it self-improving, and with human checkpoints along the way, so we can minimize the time that we spend in front of the computer and optimize the results that we're getting as a result of using this system architecture. So looking at AI integration and corporate training, that takes up 70% of what I do, followed by photography and then accessibility. The question becomes, what does my client acquisition funnel then look like from the number of potential clients at the awareness stage to the actual purchase stage? So the beauty of these charts is, again, they didn't exist before I showed you these, and I didn't know how it would break down what it breaks down. It does other things for some of the other people I process. It'll do line graphs of like the number of content pieces over the number of weeks. It does stuff like heat maps, because then you can determine in this quadrant, in this time, it does this thing. The number of things it's teaching me about myself are incredible because I'm able to start connecting the dots that are in my head. So what I would do at this point is I'd go through each of these, I'd save them with the download button, or I'd expand fully like that, and then I would screenshot using Screenpresso. And once you screenshot at one time, you can repeat that screenshot for the same area, and you can do that by going Shift Print Screen for screenshot previous region. And then you can just go through and click each of these, and as you click through them, you can just do Shift Print Screen and it'll screenshot that previous region, and then you can go on to the next one by clicking below on the right. So where do we go from here? Well, we've got our research over here, we've got our charts, white papers, and all this good stuff to go off of. What do we do first? And that is a hard question to answer. So I think to answer that, we have to ask, what is our current goal and how do we optimize our goals based on the priority, the tasks that they take to meet those milestones, and how to rank them accordingly, because I'm not great at task initiation. I'm good at organizing and prioritizing, but getting started's really hard. So I could ask it maybe something like, if I go over to this other tool, I'll use voice to text, I'll say, what are the top 10 steps for me to consider to get started on all of this? And I'm going to copy that, and I'll come back over here and hit enter, and then it's going to give us hopefully something we can think on to walk away with, things that are tangible, practical, and actionable, things that feel like it's not moving a mountain. And here we are. Define and package clear service offerings. Let's say make those tables instead. Make that a set of 10 tables instead, because I understand each of those steps better when they're broken down into pieces. So this is going to take each of those steps and make it its own table. And there we have it. You can see that it's broken down the major areas that we've been discussing, as well as the parts that it recommended we consider. Now we need to just make sure that when it says stuff like, I'm noticing it didn't fully align it. It just made 10 summaries. I meant just on this data. So I'm going to tell it to do that again, but I'm going to say run that again, but just on this data. One table per number. Okay. Although this summary is good right here, I want it to be summary tables on each of these action steps. So by asking for really specific tables on really specific data, I'm going to hopefully get a step-by-step guide in the form of 10 tables, one per step. And there we are. So here are the 10 tables that it did for the step-by-step. Clear service offerings, create 3 to 5 distinct packages, clear pricing and deliverables. It recommends X, Y, and Z. That's great. Number 2, starving artists, mindset. Target mindset is business-oriented. Action established appropriate pricing tiers. Creating YouTube content strategy, saving 100+ hours a week using AI tools. Purpose of lead generation with a content focus on AI for business productivity, which, looking at my breakdown chart from last time, shows that AI for business and productivity is one of the things I'm focusing on. In fact, it's the highest topic of relevance. So what this means is that it is on the right track for being aligned with what I want to focus on and how I want to show up in the world. Implementing a follow-up system for client acquisition and retention. This is for better client relationships and following a specific action. Reach out to my deck designer and project manager as far as taking strategic partnerships to the next phase, and develop case studies around successful AI integrations with friends like Gwen and anyone else who wants to collaborate with me. I've enjoyed meeting so many of you along the way, and I can't wait to share more details on my story, how I'm helping people like you grow, and championing what you do best with the power of technology to help us get there. So after I develop these case studies and I update my capabilities deck and marketing, I'm gonna come back to this idea of a part-time strategic consultant to provide stable income and financial stability. So this could be in the form of the service offerings we already covered, which would be AI integration, strategic consulting, and productivity enhancement. And maybe the last step would be to parse out our course. So based on this, we'll go over here. That was excellent, thank you. Based on this outcome, please in detail define the core services and offers that Matthew has based on his product service profiles and the personas he serves. This should include strategic consulting, fractional roles for advising, and system workshops and implementation. So now I'll take that voice to text, I'll copy paste it over into Apari, and I'll hit enter, and this will probably be the last step I do for the moment. So you might be wondering, what do you do at this stage? You have a giant thread of data that you can, click in the top right and create a share link for. You could copy paste all of this into a strategic document, but what does it all actually mean? And how do we look at it in a way that makes sense? That question is then answered by getting a polished view. Because it made a numbered list, I'm gonna say, please polish that with H2, H3, sectional, tables, etc. And then hopefully we'll get a nice succinct outcome of what are my core services and offers that I discussed with this other leader during this call, and how did Margot and I move through this conversation in a way that makes it actionable for me beyond just talking about it. So it's going to read over that a few more times, it's going to look at this thread, and then it's going to finalize this report, and hopefully it's going to be useful. If I find that it's missing something, I might request it add something else. If it finds that it's missing something, is where it'll get interesting. So if I say excellent, let's expand that. All I have to do is use the white paper prompt from earlier and start this new section with that, and then hit go, and then we'll get an even more detailed plan to follow. So right now I've trained over 3,000 people on neurodiversity and disability inclusion, focusing on how people think, learn, communicate, and create differently. I'm blind in one eye, I'm neurodivergent, I'm experienced communication and barriers and a unique perspective of these, limited runway of this, etc., and grow from there. So it's interesting to think through. So on the other side of this, we end up with a finalized, polished white paper that's going to give me really specific strategic directions on where I need to lean in next. And this is really useful because I'll have a better understanding of where I'm at, where I'm going, and how I actually get there. If you find this video helpful, if you want to be able to look at your data streaming by like this with all of the patterns parsed, then let me know what your biggest challenge is right now and what you're hoping to work through, because I'm excited to share these processes and perspectives that I've come through over the years. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, and I'm looking forward to exploring the topic of AI more with you, helping you achieve your goals, win back your time, start getting that 100+ hours a week back. And there you have it, a snapshot at my A to Z process for saving an average of 100 hours a week with AI tools. Be sure to check the description for the tools and resources I mentioned, and in the next video, I'm going to be covering how I use Otter AI to deep dive on those meeting minutes, synthesize summaries, and clarify communications. Ready to get started? Click here to dive in.